To Behind the Ballot, where politics meets real life. We break down state and federal issues, showing how policy shapes everyday Americans. Engaged, balanced, and informative. That's our promise. I'm your host, Mikkel Jenkins.
And this is Muhammad Alec chiming in from a non-normal location. So if my audio or anything is a bit worse than usual, I sincerely apologize. I can already tell my video is a lot worse.
No, that's perfectly fine, Muhammad. Our listeners will hopefully be able to hear everything loud and clear. And what we have for our listeners today is really just three specific topics that we're going to be focusing on. One is the U.S. Senate Venezuela hearing. The second piece will be the ICE DHS funding bill and the potential shutdown that's coming potentially tomorrow. I mean, on the 30th.
Yeah.
Um, and then we also will have the FBI raid on Fulton County, kind of continuation of what we were talking about yesterday with what's going on in Minnesota and the whole voter roll requirement to have the removal of ICE agents, which has now changed, given Homan is now the now chief officer for ICE operations. So let's get started. The United States Senate hearing on Venezuela was held yesterday before the Foreign Relations Committee, centered on Secretary of State Marco Rubio's testimony regarding the Trump administration's recent military operation that resulted in the capture and removal of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro that happened earlier this month. Rubio emphasized the need for patience and rehabilitating Venezuela's oil industry and transitioning the country toward democratic governance. And we talked a little bit about that on the podcast, how the United States will be funding the transition of the oil refineries in Venezuela to bring them more up to date and more modern. I believe that number was about $84 billion is what's going to be used of taxpayers' money for that, basically. And Rubio outlined progress in reducing foreign influence from adversaries like Iran, Russia, and China, and highlighting cooperative communications with Venezuela's interim leaders. I have heard actually that the president that is now the interim president that is now there is actually not going to be playing ball, or seems like she doesn't want to be playing ball with the United States when it comes to the Venezuelan oil and what's all going on there. And then, the president Delcy Rodriguez says that she's pledged to several oil ties with Cuba and align with U.S. objectives. And then Rubio has assured lawmakers that the U.S. is not currently planning for postured military action, stating with certainty that no additional force is anticipated on the country, though imminent threats. Particularly those involving oil cooperation or self defense under the Alien Enemies Act, could be certain measures that the administration can take. This stance is drew a lot of bipartisan scrutiny, while Rubio defending the operation as a necessary drug bust. And we've kind of stopped hearing about those drug boats. I actually do think there is a court case that the that individuals have brought from towards the Trump administration regarding that boat that they did, that boat that was traveling to the United States that they ended up blowing up, and that they saw that there were survivors and they hit it again. So that is a court proceeding that's going to happen, and not too sure how far it'll go, but it's just interesting to see those levels of litigation rising across the board. And a lot of the reactions to hearing this were pretty polarized. Mohammed, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna say that I do agree. It's I really think that whole all the news and information coming out from the government regarding the drug boats and more was entirely just to use as like motivation for these strikes. And I think it's pretty clear, honestly, that we've seen what the government is willing to do. This isn't like a first time the government has gone into a foreign country, but it is the first time they've kidnapped. And we did take out Saddam Hussein, though. To be fair, I believe actually I got to
And
double check.
Gaddafi as well, don't forget, from
Yeah, so
Libya.
this is not by any means the first time we've taken out a leader of a country. But it's just really the setup for being able to do it with some public support. And we even saw most or majority of the GOP was fully backing this. And I mean, I've even had a few acquaintances, I should say, more than friends, like talk to me about it, saying like, oh, how this was justified, how this was okay because they were
Yeah.
causing destabilizing the region. I'm like, so what are we doing if not also destabilizing the region? So based off your own logic, then they can come in and get rid of our president. And
Yeah, exactly.
Senator Rand Paul even talked
Mhm.
about this. He was like, is this not an act of war? And Rubio was like, oh no, this is a precise military operation, not an act of war. And Rand Paul asked, like, if somebody came to America, bombed DC, kidnapped the president, and took him out of U.S. soil, would you consider that an act of war? And Rubio was just basically dodging that question, saying like, "Oh well, this isn't exactly that kind of case." I'm like, "This is exact. That's exactly what it is. You went to a foreign country and took the leader of that country
Yeah.
using the military. If we had that happen to us, people would be going. We'd be using that as an excuse to go inflict hell on the country
Yeah.
that did that.
Yeah.
And so just to see the double standards is extremely annoying. But
Yeah,
I
he
mean, that's the
even
name of the
said,
game.
yeah, he even said, I think, I believe it was Rand Paul or one of the ranking members on that committee stated that, he was asking the questions about Cuba, and I mean, Marco Rubio was like, we would like to see some regime change in Cuba, and that's going to be where they're going to head these regime change actions interventions next. Realistically, I mean, they've already said it ever since Venezuela has happened that Cuba would be on their list, and for the Cuban president to, quote unquote, watch his back. Um, but sticking to like really the hearing and kind of like the reactions, it was pretty polarized. With obviously there,
I want to
yeah, yeah,
add this because I think it's funny. They were also talking about regime changes in Iran, and they were
yes, yeah,
mentioning how they want to arm Iranian protesters to fight against the government. And I was like, imagine that. Imagine if a foreign country said, "Hey, we're going to give the Americans more weapons so they can destabilize the government." Like it just classic actual conservative ideology would just be saying this is in no way nor shape our issue. Let those
yeah,
people deal with it themselves. This is not something that we need to deal with. That we don't need to be the world police, nor do we need to be the ones to be the judge, jury, and executioner, or the ones that dictate what is good and what is not. But we are absolutely our government for the last quite a while has been just doing just exactly that. Even the so-called conservatives. That's why the term neocon exists nowadays, because it's not really actual conservative ideology. It's much bigger on what is going on in terms of being war hawks. And there's the one quote I like from Massey. There's one party, the Uniparty, the war party. They're both the same thing. Like
yeah,
they might argue there's Democrats and Republicans. They might argue that there's a third party who've been involved. They're independents, but almost everybody always votes for more war or sending money for more war. And it really is uh, aggravating because we are not in a good state domestically, and we just keep seeing more of our money sent overseas for war. That is not our issue.
yeah, and all that money that is being sent overseas, we could obviously use that for domestic reasonings. And that was a lot of the points that Republicans were pointing to, and even some Democrats when Biden was aggressively supporting Ukraine. And we're seeing that shift now to where it's like, no, we want to, Republicans are now in supporting of these military actions of regime change and interventions, whatever you may call them. It's interesting to see that switch, not just on this, but on multiple issues as well that we're seeing from the right. And then
Oh
during the
yeah.
hearing, there were protesters, of course, as always. I'm pretty sure Marco Rubio had laughed and said, "Now you go off to jail," or something of that matter to the protester. And Vice President JD Vance fueled controversies by tweeting a comparison of Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth's interpretations to Forrest Gump arguing with Isaac Newton, drawing accusations of ableism and furthering dividing public opinion. So I think he obviously isn't helping with the fact that these senators are grilling Marco Rubio, and then Vance is just tweeting out, kind of attacking them in this face. I mean, I don't think anyone really should, when an issue such as going into a foreign nation and removing its leader and justifying it as right, should ever make a mockery of any discourse that's going on within those levels of hearings. But in contrast, largely with Republicans, they're backing Rubio, praising the operation's strategic success and diminishing adversarial footholds and expressing optimism about interim cooperation. So we're seeing them praise him on these certain levels, but when it was the Democrats on our side with, well, on their side with Ukraine, you did not see that level of praising. It was more so the opposite, like I was talking about, that focus, that wanting to focus on America first in the home front. But obviously, we have lost that from this administration. We have been focused primarily on the one percenters of the world, and also these global escapades, I could say, that Trump really wants to have under his belt as wins overall.
And what I really find kind of funny about this whole situation is that Venezuela is a member of the UN. If the US really
Yeah,
had a case of, oh, hey, and they're also a member of the ICC, even though the United States isn't. US and Israel are one of the only few countries not part of the ICC. And what I find funny is that if the U.S. really actually had a case that could be proven against Maduro, they would have brought and like wanted to be legitimate about it. They would have brought to the UN or the ICC, more specifically the International Crime Court, and that's the same court that has arrest warrants out for Benjamin Netanyahu as well as a few other war criminal leaders. So if they want, but they didn't want to do that because two reasons. One, they know no one's going to say, "Oh, hey, we're going to now step in the way of for Venezuela because the United States did this." No one cares about Venezuela like that, nor do they have the power. And two, it's because they couldn't actually prove a reasonable case at all in the court of law. And that's why we're
yeah,
even seeing in the court case they're trying to put up against them in the United States that they were originally saying that Maduro was like the head of a narco gang. And now they've changed that to say, oh, hey, well, he's not really the head of it, actually. He just kind of influenced it by being the president. And so the goalposts are already changing.
yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what they try to argue in a court of law and what judge more specifically takes it, because that can really be the make it or break it. Which judges determine what will be the guilty or innocent. Because I got to actually check. This isn't, I
Yeah.
don't know if there's a jury for this. This isn't a U.S. citizen.
No, I don't know if it's going to be a jury for. It's going to be interesting how the court case proceedings are laid out and how the process goes. But I know our listeners can definitely bet on us being able to get all that information and let it be known to them on this podcast. And get some water. I want to go into our next piece that we have here. One that's been in the news a lot today. Realistically, there's been a lot of changes in what's been going on with ICE DHS funding bill and this looming shutdown. So the ongoing standoff over the Department of Homeland Security funding bill as of today has escalated the risk of a partial government shutdown, with Senate Democrats blocking a six-bill appropriations package that includes funding for DHS, state, HHS, and the Pentagon, accounting for over 75% of discretionary spending. The vote failed 45 to 55, with 8 Republicans joining all Democrats, driven by demands for ICE reforms following the fatal shooting of the ICU nurse Alex Peretti, which I do know there was a additional video that was put out about Peretti, I believe, attacking a ICE vehicle. As understanding as that is a horrible light to show him in, as well as I don't think anyone should be taking those actions against ICE vehicles when it comes to damaging federal property or things of that nature. I don't think that that video justifies anything with the killing that happened this past weekend. I don't think it has anything to justify he had it coming, deserved it, or anything of that nature. Anyone that spouts that, it's pretty disgusting point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll add something that I disagree with you on that first part. I do think, I mean, if the federal government's doing tyrannical stuff, you should absolutely fight against the federal government. You should also fight against the state government if they're doing tyrannical stuff. You should fight against any government that's doing tyrannical stuff. And if,
Right, but I mean, in that context, you basically are tying yourself up to be, like gripped up, all that stuff. So just to stay out of it.
But there's a big
Record,
difference
don't be an
between, oh, hey, this
agitator.
guy is damaging property, let's arrest him, versus, oh, this guy's pissing us off because he's attacking our car, let's murder him. And I really agree with that second part of what you said. This doesn't at all justify executing the guy.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
and I am hoping that these recent events really make Americans open their eyes, because ICE didn't exist until 24 years ago. It's not like the country, the United States, has needed specifically immigration's customs enforcement to be a proper country. Before, that
Yep.
was all just wrapped up under border patrol, and it was a more of a vague situation. But after 9/11 happened, they wanted to specifically target they made ICE. And so it's not like if ICE were to be dissolved, the United States would be overrun by illegal criminals, like some people on the GOP side of things make you want you to believe. I mean, I think what we're even especially seeing now is that most of the people that ICE is bringing in aren't even criminals. They're just people who came in the country illegally, or some people are actual citizens. Peretti was a citizen. Renee Good was a citizen,
Yeah.
and these people have been murdered by ICE. So how much of this is how much of this is actually about deporting illegals versus how much of it is trying to impact the numbers in Democrat-controlled states,
That's
which is
exactly the reasoning. I mean, we
yeah.
hopefully our listeners were able to tie the string around the pattern that we were able to lay out for them yesterday, and that pattern still continues with the Fulton County FBI raid as well. And sticking on ICE, DHS, and the funding bill, Democrats led by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer insist on immigration operate. Sorry, insist on separating the DHS bill for renegotiation, basically taking all the reforms that they want and actually put them in a standalone bill and not have it coupled with the five additional appropriation bills. And refusing to support the bill without any of these measures like stricter warrant requirements, mandatory body cameras, and visible agent identification, independent investigations into ICE incidents. And this push is really reflecting broader outrage over ICE's aggressive tactics. And as I was saying on the previous podcast episode, that these tactics tie similarly to what is going on in Israel and tactics that the IDF uses against Palestinians. Representative Greg Caesar has emphasized the need for real reforms to prevent abuses. And that's kind of what Homan was kind of saying this morning during his press conference. He was basically saying that the federal government did not do a perfect job at all. He said months ago I think from March, he was stating that if the rhetoric doesn't stop, there's going to be bloodshed. And he was exactly right about that. It did not stop. So he is coming into this as a more professional view on it and professional operation.
More,
He's speaking with Mayor Fry, he's speaking with Tim Walz, and they're actually doing more targeted um, deportation rates and not just a blanket approach like that has been happening. And as we're seeing, Chrissy Noam and the rest of them, they're all starting to turn on each other. I mean, Chrissy Noam has said that everything that she said from the podium, speaking about Peretti, the deportations and everything in her wheelhouse were all given to her by Trump and or Stephen Miller. So someone's foot is going to be held to the fire.
just following orders excuse.
Just following orders as an excuse. And history has told us individuals that say that it's not in the best light realistically. Like, yes, she was following orders, but she did them willfully. And she lied willfully as well. And
I mean, I think that's
yeah.
the main thing. You see that all the time with politicians, but that's especially what we're seeing in these recent events within the Trump admin.
No, yeah, without a doubt. And then diving into the additional context of really these ICE, the core of these deportations. The operations are secured through multi-year funding from prior legislation, insulating them from immediate shutdown impacts. But the broader DHS bill's failure could shutter non-essential programs in critical areas. Statistics from a Cato Institute analysis of ICE data from October 1st to November 15th, 2025 underscores Democrats' concerns, showing a 73% of detainees had no criminal convictions. Nearly half had had no convictions or pending charges, and only 5 to 8% had violent or property convictions, with most criminal records involving immigration or traffic offenses, contradicting pretty much the administration claims that they've been saying for the past year. With
Yeah.
them saying that, from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, that 70% are violent criminals. In Minneapolis, we have the borders are who we were just talking about. His deployment is shifting the tactics to targeted deportations, which is really how it should be done. I'm pretty sure it's how Obama was able to deport so many people. It's targeted deportations is the way to go. You can't be going into Home Depots, garden stores, or things of that nature, and trying to round up immigrants when they're, um, benefiting and also contributing to their local community. And that's when you have these protesters that rise up and stand against these operations, and you have continuous incidents that have been happening these past month and a half. So I think Holman bringing in that more narrow, laser focused approach is the best way to go about it, to be able to at least give the Trump administration some way of bringing in illegals, but not having that full force, aggressive behavior that we really have seen take the country by hold, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I will be interested to see where ICE goes from here. I don't know if it'll be more of just Miller and Trump because they're really the ones that control this whole cogwheel. They're the one that tell Pam
Yeah.
Bondi what to say. They're the one that tell Chrissy Noem what to do. They're the one that command everything on top. And the DOJ is supposed to be separate. These are organizations that aren't supposed to be commanded and run by the president, but by the people
Yeah,
that lead the
basically.
organization. The DOJ especially is supposed to be separate, but it's not. And I the easiest way to say it is I do think Noam at this point of the game is going to be thrown under the bus.
She
I
has to.
think Trump and Miller are really going to try to put blame on her for all this because how ICE has been going has been actually negatively affecting Trump. His stance on immigration, people's opinion on it, has gone from one of the few positive things about him to a very negative thing
I
about him.
think
It's
it's been
all,
almost like what, -20?
yeah, it went from
Yeah,
like
just like
plus 10
-20,
to
yeah.
-20. Yeah,
Yeah,
thirty
exactly. And
percent swing over these ICE murders and how they've been behaving. It's bad.
yeah, and Democrats are saying, I was reading this, they're saying they've been basically telling Trump if he does not fire Christine Noem, they will begin the impeachment process. So basically, he's
Yeah.
like, you get rid of her, or we just start this process and we'll just drag you through the proceedings like they did before. Which, I mean, I think, as we said before, yeah, I mean, the other day, Pam Bondi and Noam will be the first ones to go, which you could probably bet on Kalshi to see which one's going to be the first one to go. But it's going to be really interesting to see
Not
how.
sponsored, sadly.
Yeah, no, not sponsored, not sponsored. But it's gonna be interesting to see how they leave, the fallout of when they leave, because as I was saying, we already know that Kristi Noem is basically trying to throw someone under the bus for the things that she was told to say. But for Pam Bondi, I think she may be first, I feel like, because it's now 41 days since the Epstein files have now lapsed from supposedly supposed to be released, with still only 1% of the information out there and everything else just redacted. And apparently they're still going through it. But
I mean,
41 days, it's gonna be for the next 4 years. We're gonna just be hearing about it not being released until a Democrat comes in and possibly may very well release it. I mean, hopefully that's
yeah.
not the case and it's actually released. But want to focus back in, actually, the last section that we have here is the FBI raid on Fulton County,
I
which
just want to
ties
add
in.
a little bit to the Pam Bondi
Oh yeah, go
situation.
ahead.
She's really being put in like between a rock and a hard place because
Yep.
it's literally like, oh well, either you disobey Congress and you're gonna go to jail most likely, or you disobey the president who has been very erratic with what he's been up to, who could also very well get you in jail.
Yeah.
And so the woman has chosen her allegiances, so she's gonna have to. She's made her bed, so now she's got to sleep in it, as the saying goes. And I don't have any empathy or sympathy for her whatsoever. She knew what she was doing when she picked the position that she was going to defend pedophilia and defend the rape of American children.
Yeah.
And I think one disgusting thing that we've seen from people on the right, Megyn Kelly is a good example of this, where they're saying like, oh, Epstein didn't actually rape children; he raped teenagers. Now, teenagers are still children. If you're a
Right.
13-year-old, you're a child. 14, child. 15, 16, 17, by American law, you're a child. If you want to
Pro-life people
argue,
too, by the way. You would
they're
think.
what?
pro-life. Like
Yeah,
it's only pro-life when
pro-life.
they're
They're
in the
fine with
womb.
children. Yeah, exactly. They're fine with children getting raped, but they're not fine with abortions being a thing that people can choose for themselves. I don't like abortions either. I still think the government shouldn't have a say in it because why should they? I
Right.
like less government in my life. I think everyone should like less government in their life. And to the point of where Pam Bondi is going with this all, I really think that I don't know if this is what she expected when she took the agreed to the job, because especially because when Trump was first running, he was all about release the Epstein files, release the Epstein files. It was one of his biggest campaign promises, and now you've seen a complete 180 on that. And I wonder how much of this is her being blindsided. But I have no sympathy for her or empathy because she knew as the days were going on what was going on. And it's been 41 days since the law was passed that
Yep.
required her to pass them. And she's still to release them. And she's still not doing it. And I hope whatever happens to the woman is just,
Yeah,
and
that's the only thing really. Just want something just to be done because this is an issue that every American, knows about and wants to be resolved and wants just all the information out there. We don't care if it's Democrats, Republicans, princes, queens, justices, whoever, just, release the files. And if the house has to burn down, you just let it burn down. It can always be rebuilt. And there's many generations of Americans who would be willing to step up and actually do that. So,
Mhm.
I mean, just release the files. Whoever's in it, they knew what they did, and they should be held accountable and should be tried fairly as well, just as anyone should if they committed a crime or did anything just as heinous.
It's funny to me. Bill Clinton, like a month, 2 months ago, released a statement saying that the Epstein file should be released, and then him and Hillary
Yeah,
got called to testify in Congress, and they got subpoenaed, and then they denied the subpoena.
yeah. I mean,
All
there
talk
was,
though, like,
yeah. I think there were pictures of Bill Clinton that were released, like, let's just say, very out there pictures of Bill Clinton, and
to say
uh
it this way.
he just told him, like, just release them. He's like, I don't care. But obviously, we've heard the reports that Trump's name is littered within them, and they're just going through and blacking out basically anything. But we won't know for sure until the files are accurately and, well, not they won't be timely released, but are just released in general. We just want to know, why has this sex trafficking cabal had such a chokehold on our government, and why our elected officials have been so eager to protect these individuals? I know we all know why, but we
I
need
mean,
to look at those
according
files
to
to. Mhm.
according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she met with Trump regarding why she was so insistent on releasing the Epstein files, he was angry with her, saying, "I
Yeah,
have friends who are going to be implicated in this. I don't want that to occur. You are doing this, and I don't agree with it, and that's why we're angry with you."
and
And I'm
then
like,
she
dude,
left.
like, yeah, I'm like, you can take her word or don't, but what we know for a fact is that Trump is trying to cover up the release of these files. And so the question is why? Is it because he's going to be implicated? Is it because his friends are going to be implicated? Or is it both? Or maybe it's something even greater than that. And I mean, I'm a big guy when I say, I really mean it when I say this. I really do think that the truth being out there is always the best way of action.
Without a doubt.
And when your career relies on lies, which is most politicians, you don't want the truth to come out whatsoever.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, the truth always lights the way, and it just needs to come up from out of the shadows of the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, um, wanting to move on to the FBI raid on Fulton County. So the FBI's raid on Fulton County's election hub and operations center in Union City, Georgia. Mind you, Georgia is where Donald Trump called the Secretary of State to try to get additional ballots. Um, the incident today involved the incident yesterday, sorry, involved executing a court authorized search warrant to seize approximately 700 boxes of ballots and other records for the 2020 presidential election as part of an investigation into alleged election fraud and potential violations of federal laws on election record retention and voter fraud. County officials, including Commissioner Mo Ivory, com- confirmed the seizure, noting agents collected physical ballots, computers, phones, and documents, with the operation concluding that evening amid cooperation from local staff. The raid tied to President Trump's persistent unsustained claims of widespread voter fraud in his 2020 loss in Georgia, where Biden won by about 12,000 votes, escalated tensions with Democrats alleging political retribution and lack of authority, arguing it undermines democracy and could influence future elections in 2026 and 2028 by intimidating officials or justifying takeovers. And I've seen a lot of Democrats online kind of worried about the Trump administration's for usage of these ballots and further usage of ICE. A lot of individuals are worried that the Insurrection Act could be something that's used on these cities come 2026 and or 2028, and that ICE could actually be reformed in some brand to actually election enforcement. Because just think about how that can be done. ICE agents would be able to go to these election polling sites and be able to check to see if anyone was illegal. That is the most perfect way you could set that up, to have ICE and federal agents at these polling places, making sure that illegal immigrants are not voting in these federal elections. However, you would have the same instances as you have in Minnesota, where you have elected officials who may not be so privy to well, wouldn't be so accepting of the Trump administration's election force and or ICE coming to their county, district, and or state.
I
It's gonna
mean,
be interesting to see, really. Yeah.
what I want to add to all of that is that it's a very big thing that states run their own election. That's one of the
Oh yeah,
original
completely.
things enshrined in the Constitution is that states run their own elections. And it's also a fairly classic conservative ideology. One thing that I love to bring up because it's so blatant and so frustrating is simply how much the conservatives nowadays don't actually have traditional conservative ideology. You know, it's much more neoconservative is the normal instead of traditional conservatism. And if you were to try to suggest, hey, there's Democratic president's going to send in the military to these red states so they can supervise the elections going on, it would be met with massive fire and oh, he's so cute. It'll be met with massive fire and more from the conservatives. And yet here they are just settling down, going against what is a simple, very straightforward value of like, hey, the federal government should not interfere with state elections. And I do. I mean, it reminds me of that leaked Ted Cruz audio
Oh
where he
yeah.
was basically saying that the president is the Republicans are going to get slaughtered in 2026, and that Trump's going to get impeached every single week until he leaves office.
Yeah,
And
the house is falling.
yeah, and I really do agree with that. I mean, I think that he's just in desperation mode right now. I think the conservatives are just too afraid to go against him because he has a lot of sway with still a lot of voters. You know,
Yeah.
even if 70% of GOP voters value Trump's opinion over their constituents, which is something I heavily disagree with, but something that a lot of people do, that will cause issues for these politicians who don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be on Trump's bad side. And it's just I, a lot of these conservatives, a ton of them are in between a rock and a hard place of either going with their gut or going with their constituents or like what they truly value or going
Yeah.
with Trump. And one thing that I like to point out, because so many of them are afraid of getting primaried by somebody with public Trump support, is that Massey has been doing just fine.
Oh, just fine.
Just fine. He's projected to win for the second time in a
Isn't it like
row with
79% or something like that? Like it's pretty
yeah,
up there, his winning percentage.
and he's a good example that if you just actually care for your constituents and stand up for actual conservative values in a conservative cultural or an ideological area, that you'll still win even if the president is rooting against you because your constituents care more about the relationship you have with them than they do about the president. But that actually requires going to bonding in a sense with your constituents, which we've seen a lot of politicians in general, especially conservatives nowadays not do. I mean, Susan Collins, for example, didn't have a town hall for about a decade. You know, we've seen
Yeah,
multiple.
dude, I saw that. I'm like, how do you not have a town hall for
And how does she
almost
keep getting
10
elected?
years?
And how does she keep getting
Like,
elected? It's crazy to me.
well, that's just the complacentness with voters. They target the super
Yeah.
voters who are the ones that vote in like every single election. So With voters, everyone obviously gets their ballot and all this other information as well. But for super voters, if they know you vote in every single election, you get a lot more literature than a lot of other individuals or neighbors that are right by you.
That
And
makes sense.
yeah, I think I'm considered a super voter. Honestly, I have to double check that, but so as this raid was happening, there were pictures taken, and the presence of the DNI director Tulsi Gabbard was on site and raised a lot of alarms with lawmakers like Senator Mark Warner questioning her role and suggesting it injects the intelligence community into domestic politics, potentially violating obligations to inform Congress of foreign intelligent nexuses or legitimizing conspiracy theories. The raid coincides with broader GOP efforts, including a new anti voting bill dubbed the this is hilarious the Make Elections Great Again Act, introduced by Representative Brian Steele, I want to say.
Make
Steil.
elections great again
Yeah,
is
make elections great
hilarious.
again. So this bill proposes extreme restrictions like mandatory documentary proof of citizenship, or I mean, for registration, voter roll purges, ban on mail voting, and photo ID requirements, criticized as the most dangerous attack on voting rights in history. Now, I've always been a little wishy-washy with this because I'm like, it shouldn't take someone that hard to get a photo ID. But I have been in, in certain cases when I worked in Philadelphia, to a first legislative district, that for some individuals who may not have everything, it is hard to be able to get those documents that can get you to get the ID. So I understand some hesitations in that, but I mean, making sure that the elections are fair and secure should be every Democrats and or Republicans first, priority. Realistically, that's how we got to where we are. It's what fuels democracy. But I think doing it in certain ways that tries to take away electoral, I wouldn't even say advantages, because sometimes geographically certain states have a better advantage than other states. But just realistically, I don't see see there being a huge issue on this realistically, but I know the Democrats are very against this. But it's like 2026 individuals should be able to get, IDs and all those forms of identification. But I understand the hesitancy towards it, and lower income communities and things of that nature. But it's just a very interesting topic itself, and that's maybe a topic we can debate and further over our views on that. What are your thoughts, Mohammed?
Um, I don't even know where to start. I would like to add that it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do definitely want to debate about this another time. We've got, I don't want to say we're strapped for time, but we do have something that we're sticking to. And I've got something that I've got to do as well later. But with all that said, I'm just trying to form my thoughts, which is why I am rambling right now. Now, I do think it's interesting to see how much with photo ID. I do think photo ID is necessary,
Yeah, I mean, it's
and
got to be necessary.
when I say that, I understand that some people may be in the circumstance where they don't have an ID, but you should be able to prove you are who you are. And if you are able to register to vote in the first place, you should have an ID that can prove that you are who you are. And so this is one thing that I actually agree with the conservatives, the GOP on. And I I will say I have sympathy for the people who have struggles with this,
Yeah, definitely.
but people aren't stupid. Don't get me wrong. This may be controversial. There's that one quote I like. I don't know. I don't really fully agree with it, but it's a funny quote. And it's democracy, run by dumb people, controlled by dumb people. And it's just basically saying that if you allow the system to be controlled by uneducated voters who can be easily swayed by cultural talk or just lies or XYZ, that it's going to result in you having leaders who are incompetent and dumb as well. And I guess honestly, current Trump is probably the best example of that. But we've had decent presidents, we've had bad presidents, we've had good presidents. It's just the way it goes. And so that's one big reason why I don't really like to attribute nor like say like I fully agree with the quote, because there is some very good representatives out there. And it just so happens that we've got a president who is nowadays going through dementia and just very unwell. And I will say that I do think a voter ID is necessary. But I know, for example, in PA, that the first time you vote, you're required to bring voter ID. But then
Yeah.
after
Hmm.
that, you're not. And so I do think that even though that I agree with the idea that voter ID is necessary, that the federal government should not be trying to control state elections. I will die on that hill because it's in the Constitution. Like whether or not
Yeah,
you
I
agree
agree.
with it, disagree with it, you will have to amend the Constitution to do so, which the current Congress does not have the 2/3 support to amend the Constitution.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And then you have also Democrats, including Senators Josh McLarnin and Rep. Nikema Williams, decrying that it's a five-alarm fire for democracy, demanding Gabbert's explanation and warning of voter intimidation, with some alleging it ties into conspiracy theories of foreign interference. Media and public reactions vary across the board, with conservatives obviously celebrating it as accountability and critics viewing it as election interference, potentially expanding ICE's role into election security in blue states, kind of like what we were just talking about, promoting calls for national conversations on federal overreach, which we have been seeing. And it's interesting because conservatives are very much against national overreach or federal overreach in various ways, and we're seeing them just bend the knee and quote unquote use those Gavin Newsom knee pads to pass anything they want, or just let Trump get by um, anything he wants as well. I mean, they're standing up a little bit when it comes to Jerome Powell and certain individuals, but across the board, they have been hand in fist and basically giving him what he would want.
It's
And
interesting seeing where, like, in what circumstances they say enough is enough, and how in other
yeah,
circumstances they just completely bend over and or get on their knees. And like you imagine that the whole Venezuela operation would be so, I'd have a lot more Republicans like Rand Paul has been decrying it, like this is crazy. And but it's not that. It's about the trying to fire Jerome Powell. And I wonder how much of it is because these people realize that once the ball, if Trump is going through these powers to fire these independent appointed commissioners for the in the Federal Reserve chair, that when the Democrats get into play, they can just do that all themselves. I mean, that's exactly what Kavanaugh was saying regarding the
yes.
Federal Reserve governor, whose name I'm blanking on right now, the woman.
It
And
was
he
about the independence. It was about the Trump, the ruling about whether Trump can remove independent heads of agencies just at will.
Yeah, and his like that was his exact argument. So when a Democrat comes in, they'll get rid of everything, put in Democratic
Basically.
people, and then 4 years later, if it's a different president for a party, different party, it'll be the same exact case. Like that's not how you can build up trust in agencies, nor is it
Yeah,
how you go about running the country because you need to have
exactly.
consistency. You can't just have dramatic changes every 4 years just based off the whim of one single person. And I think it'll be interesting to see in the upcoming months where the conservatives decide to draw the line, because I do think that, especially as the midterms happen, I think if the Republicans get blasted in the midterms, they're going to abandon Trump completely. I think if the
Oh, they're
Democrats,
gonna have to. They're gonna have to save
yeah,
themselves in their own districts before, like younger generations of Republicans now start coming up and start challenging them, like we're seeing in various areas and across the nation, where you have younger generations of Democrats challenging incumbents. A few individuals that we've actually had on this podcast, and future individuals that we'll actually have on this podcast as well. And I also just want to, before we end off everything, we do have a special guest episode tomorrow. It will be releasing Saturday. It is with New Jersey congressional candidates for congressional district 11, Brendan Gill. He is actually the number two in fundraising numbers for this New Jersey race, and this
good
race
for
is
him.
to replace Mikey Sherrill. And then from after that, we'll have another guest from Indiana, who's running for Congress as well. And I do know there is another race in New Jersey for Bonnie Watson Coleman's seat. She is retiring, so that would be later on this year. So hopefully we can have someone from that race as well. But as we continue to have these conversations and these candidates on, please continue to tune in, obviously to Behind the Ballot, where we keep politics engaged, balanced, and informative. Always stay curious, stay critical, and please stay involved. I'm Mikhail Jenkins, and until next time, keep looking beyond the headlines and behind the ballot.
And this is Muhammad Alec. Thank you all for listening. God bless you all. God bless America. I love saying those two lines and hope you all have a good night.